passage. We'll quickly read and summarize the passage and then answer the questions. As the COVID 19 pandemic entered its third year with inflation rising and the supply chain faltering, many American voters were fixated not on the economy or on the virus, but on quite a different topic. What was that? Education. So, as COVID entered its third year, what was the major obsession of Americans? According to the author, it was education. In Virginia, a private equity multimillionaire won the governor's race by promising to keep public schools safe from gender neutral bathrooms, critical race theory. So, these political issues, he says he would keep the public schools free from them. Across the country, school board meetings were disrupted by death threats and chanted slogans. School board elections became pitched battles. So, board elections became battles. Battles over what? Questions like history textbooks, mask mandates, and the content of school libraries. What are these issues? So, why was education the main thing? Because governors promised, okay, if you elect me, this will be the policy in the schools. We will not have critical race theory. We'll keep schools away from all these issues. These are all political issues. Second thing, school boards also were disrupted by people saying, threatening them with guns and chants, slogan chanting. Not just that, when board elections were happening, they were not fought on issues on what kind of education. They were fought on issues like history textbook, what should be part of the history textbook, mask mandates, which is a very political thing in the US, and the content of school libraries. So, therefore, it was basically saying that politicization of education, or rather, how to keep politics away from education. What was the issue? The issue was this, that there was the problem with education was too much of politics were involved in education. That's what the first paragraph tells us. Political experts and campaign consultants were taken by surprise when schools suddenly assumed center stage in the national debate. So, political experts were totally surprised. Why? Because one of the major issues of political debates was schools. But our recent battles are nothing new. The author says there's nothing new in what's happening. Schools have always been tangled up with politics for millennia. For many, many years, the schools and politics are intertwined. They have served what? What is that they referring to? Schools. Schools have served as a proxy battlefield for cultural warriors of every stripe. So, cultural battles are fought. Fought where? In schools. Syllabi, teaching, it can be anything. That's what the author says. Especially in moments of national crisis or social upheavals, classrooms have often provided the clearest reflection of a society's deep anxiety about identity, power, and class. So, this is a very important point the author is raising. During a national crisis, during social upheaval, schools are the centers where the you get a reflection of a society's anxiety about identity, power, and class. Schools reflects this. Schools reflect this. A society's problems, anxieties about what? Identity, power, and class. So schools are the places where these issues have always been there. Author says there's nothing new in politics, and in the connection between politics and school. Identity politics, power politics, class politics have always been part of the school culture, according to the author. In Texas, where I live, those anxieties have been on full display in recent months. He says, the author is from Texas. He says these anxieties about identity, class, all this are there, have been reflected in schools in recent months. For example, the recently passed House bill requires social studies teachers to explore controversial issues from diverse and contending perspectives without giving deference to any one perspective. So when you teach social studies, teachers have been asked to take diverse and contending, means opposing perspectives on issues, and not support anyone. say this was correct or this was wrong. Don't take any sides. After the governor signed the bill into law, an administrator in a school district near Fort Worth informed teachers that they were now required, when assigning books describing the evils of the Holocaust, to include texts that offered opposing perspectives as well. Holocaust, one of the most tragic events in human history, where the Nazis literally gassed 6 million Jews, was one of the worst things in history. Here, after the passing of the bill, teachers have been told, you give the Nazi viewpoint also, give the opposing viewpoint also, not just the perspective of the Jews, of Holocaust, what happened, how Jews were exterminated, not just that, give the opposing perspective as well. So what does that mean? It soon became apparent that Texas's new law was intended not so much to protect academic freedom as to curtail it in highly specific ways. So it was not meant to further academic freedom, it was meant to restrict academic freedom. Now you cannot, whatever you're telling in history, give it from both perspectives. So when you teach the Holocaust, when you teach anything, give both the perspectives. So academic freedom, a teacher doesn't have the freedom to say it, to take a side and say this was what happened, this was what went wrong. So instead of having academic freedom to teach what I believe is correct, I have my freedom to teach has been restricted by the passing of this law in Texas. That's what the author says. For instance, the law carves out a notable exception to its doctrine, diverse and contending perspectives in the classroom. Now, here it said diverse and contending perspectives. You have to show varied perspectives. Don't show only one view of history. Show different views of history. Diverse and contending. They can conflict with each other. They can oppose each other. Show it. But the law itself has made an exception to it. How? Slavery and racism must now be taught in our public schools in one way and one way only. What is that? As deviations from, betrayals of, or failures to live up to the authentic founding principles of the United States, which include liberty and equality. So, how does this law make an exception to its own diverse and contending perspective? Now, slavery and racism is a part of US culture. Slavery was there for a very long time. It was abolished pretty late in the day. He says that must be taught as what? As deviations from and betrayals of the founding principles of the Constitution. The founding fathers had made the Constitution in one way. They believed in the principles of liberty and equality. These practices of slavery and racism were against the core principles of the founding fathers. Right? So what's wrong with that? Texas social studies teachers may want to skip over the authentic founding principle enshrined in Article 1 of the Constitution. Now, Article 1 of the Constitution, in the authentic founding principle of the Constitution, Article 1, what did it say? Anyone who was enslaved was counted as 3/5 of a person. That part shouldn't be mentioned. Right? So he says, Texas social studies may want to skip over the authentic founding principle enshrined in Article 1 that anyone who was a slave was not considered a full person, only 3/5 of a person. That was our passage. Which one of the following cannot be called true based on the information given in the passage? Texas's newly passed law exemplifies some anxieties of society. Yes, he says whenever that school is some of the anxieties of society, some of the important issues. So society's anxieties are often reflected in schools, he says. So Texas's newly passed laws also reflect how politics, race, gender, all these are society's anxieties. So A can be inferred or called true. Texas's newly passed law is full of inconsistencies. The author mentions one inconsistency. Don't you think this is rather extreme? What is the inconsistency? That they said that every aspect you have to teach, you have to explain with diverse and contending perspectives. You have to discuss diverse and contending perspectives. At the same time, he says the exception being about slavery and right? That part, he says article 1 of the constitution says a slave should be seen, and they said that to teach racism and slavery as something which was a deviation from the principles that the founding fathers of the Indian of the US constitution had. So the author points out that what about article 1, which says that anyone who is a slave is considered three-fifths of a person. So he gives one exception, that or inconsistency does not mean it is full of inconsistencies. So this is an extreme option. That definitely is not true. B is our answer. Let's quickly look at CDNE. Texas's new laws actual aims are different from its purported aims. That is true. The author says, right, what is here is not increasing academic freedom, rather it curtails academic freedom. So its actual purpose is to curtail academic freedom, while its purported aim is to increase academic freedom. Texas's new law deals with how social studies teachers should explore controversial issues. Yes, they said use diverse and contending perspectives. As far as the aim is what they told, this is correct. Texas's new law may have implications on assigning books on some historical topics. Yes, because you have to take, for example, he has given the instance of the Holocaust. You can't teach it from only one perspective, teach it from diverse. So, therefore, it will have implications on what kind of books you have. You have to only choose those books which give different perspectives rather than one. So, they are all correct. B is the answer. Therefore, that is not correct.